Think about the future for a moment, not just any future, but a time when humanity has become a truly interplanetary species. We've built cities on Mars, with domed habitats, terraformed landscapes, and communities thriving millions of miles from Earth. It's a vision that captures our collective imagination, something straight out of science fiction brought to life through sheer human determination and innovation. But there's a hidden challenge lurking behind this grand achievement, one that rarely makes the headlines yet is absolutely fundamental to making life on another planet possible. While we focus on rockets, habitats, and survival, we often overlook the silent backbone of any civilization: communication. How do you send a message, stream a video, or even browse the web when the nearest server is tens of millions of miles away? The answer lies in one of the most ambitious technological undertakings humanity has ever conceived: building an interplanetary internet. This isn't just about extending our current networks into space. It's about reimagining connectivity from the ground up. The obstacles are staggering. Imagine the delay as data travels at the speed of light across the void, taking anywhere from 4 to 24 minutes just for a simple signal to make a one-way trip between Earth and Mars. Add to that cosmic radiation, solar flares, and the sheer vastness of space interfering with transmissions, and you begin to see why this digital bridge between worlds is arguably more complex than establishing physical settlements. We're not just building infrastructure, we're engineering a system that must withstand the extremes of the cosmos while remaining fast, reliable, and seamless for those who depend on it. This is the unsung hero of our multi-planetary future, and its creation will test the limits of human ingenuity in ways we're only beginning to understand. In this journey, we'll uncover why constructing an interplanetary internet is harder than colonizing Mars itself. We'll explore the physics that defy our earthly notions of instant communication, the technology being developed to overcome these barriers, and the profound implications this network will have for how we live, work, and connect across the solar system. This isn't just a story about engineers and scientists, it's about all of us, and how our desire to explore and connect is driving one of the most fascinating technological revolutions in history. So join me as we dive into the layers of this incredible challenge and discover why the digital threads that bind worlds together may ultimately define our future among the stars. At first glance, the monumental task of building a city on another world seems like the ultimate challenge. We picture massive construction projects under alien skies, creating life support systems from scratch, and solving the puzzle of sustainable food and water. These are immense hurdles, no doubt, but they are hurdles we understand. They are extensions of engineering, architecture, and biology fields where we have centuries of accumulated knowledge. We know how to build structures to withstand extreme environments. We're learning how to grow plants in controlled settings. We understand the principles of recycling air and water. The problems are severe, but the disciplines are familiar. The colonization of Mars is about scaling up and adapting known science to an unforgiving new context. Now shift your perspective to the challenge of sending an email from Mars to Earth. This seems simple by comparison, almost trivial, but this is where the dream meets a brutal and unfamiliar reality. Our entire concept of networking, from the internet in your home to global fiber optic cables, is built on one fundamental assumption: instantaneous response. Protocols like Transmission Control Protocol, or TCP, which forms the backbone of our internet, require a near-instant handshake between devices. You send a packet of data, and you expect an acknowledgement to come back almost immediately. If it doesn't, the system assumes the packet was lost and sends it again. This simple, efficient system completely shatters across interplanetary distances. The speed of light, while incredibly fast, is not instantaneous. When Mars and Earth are at their closest, a signal still takes over 3 minutes to travel one way. At their farthest, that delay stretches to around 22 minutes. This means a simple request from a Martian settler to load a web page from an Earth server could face a round-trip delay of 40 minutes or more. Our earthly internet protocols would interpret this vast silence not as a natural delay, but as a catastrophic network failure. It would constantly be resending data, clogging the interplanetary bandwidth with redundant packets, and ultimately failing to transmit anything useful. We aren't just dealing with a slow connection. We are dealing with a fundamental incompatibility between our technology and the physics of our solar system. This is the core of the disparity. Colonization applies our known sciences to new extremes, while interplanetary communication demands we invent entirely new sciences. We must throw out the networking rulebook and write a new one from scratch. This means developing entirely new protocols like delay-tolerant networking, or DTN, which is often described as a store-and-forward system. Imagine it as a celestial postal service. Instead of demanding an immediate receipt for every letter, a DTN node will hold onto a data packet, safely storing it until the next link in the chain, perhaps a passing orbiter or a dedicated communications satellite, comes within range. It then forwards the packet on its journey, hop by patient hop across millions of miles. This isn't about speed, it's about reliability and patience, creating a resilient digital backbone that acknowledges and works with the immense delays of space rather than fighting against them. The stakes for solving this are astronomically high. A communications failure isn't just about colonists missing their favorite shows from Earth. It's about the lag in vital medical diagnostics, where a doctor on Earth might see a patient's date to almost an hour too late. It's about the critical delay in sending emergency instructions or software patches to a habitat facing a life support crisis. It's about the profound psychological impact of isolation, where a broken video call with family could take days to troubleshoot. While a mechanical failure on Mars might be fixed with tools and ingenuity on site, a deep flaw in the interplanetary network is a vulnerability that stretches across the entire solar system, one that could stall missions, strand settlers, and jeopardize everything we've worked to build. The success of our physical colonies will depend, more than we realize, on the invisible, resilient web of data we weave between them. So we've established that the very rules of our earthly internet break down in the void. But to truly grasp the scale of this problem, we need to confront the universe's ultimate speed limit, the speed of light itself. We often throw that term around as a synonym for instantaneous, but in the context of our solar system, it's agonizingly slow. This isn't a matter of upgrading our modems or laying faster cables. It's a fundamental physical barrier imposed by the cosmos. The time it takes for a single bit of data to travel from Earth to Mars isn't constant. It fluctuates wildly because both planets are constantly moving on their own orbits around the Sun. At their absolute closest approach, a rare event that happens roughly every 2 years, a laser beam or radio wave screaming across the void, will still take over 3 minutes to make the one-way trip. But that's the best-case scenario, a fleeting window of relative connectivity. For the vast majority of the time, the planets are much farther apart. On average, you're looking at a 12 to 15-minute delay for a signal to travel one way, and at their maximum separation, when Earth and Mars are on opposite sides of the Sun, that delay stretches to a staggering 22 minutes. Let that sink in for a moment. A simple hello typed by an astronaut on Mars would take 22 minutes to appear on a screen on Earth. The response of hello back would take another 22 minutes to return. That's a minimum 44-minute wait for a two-word exchange. This completely shatters any concept of a live conversation. This profound delay, known as latency, is the silent killer of our current networking protocols. The entire foundation of the Internet you're using right now, the Transmission Control Protocol and Internet Protocol Suite, or TCP/IP, is built on a foundation of rapid-fire conversation. Your computer sends a packet of data and immediately expects a tiny acknowledgement packet to come back saying, "I got it." If that acknowledgement doesn't arrive within a very short, predetermined window, your computer assumes the packet got lost in the traffic of the network and promptly sends it again. This system works flawlessly on Earth, where round-trip times are measured in milliseconds. But place that same system into the interplanetary context, and it becomes a catastrophic failure. A computer on Mars would send a packet to Earth and then wait for that acknowledgement. But by the time the acknowledgement finally arrives 22 minutes later, the computer's internal timer would have given up long ago. It would have assumed the packet was lost and would have spent the last 22 minutes uselessly resending the same data over and over again, completely clogging the precious communication channel with redundant information. The protocol's very design, its efficiency on Earth, becomes its greatest flaw in space. It's like trying to have a meaningful conversation with someone by shouting across a vast canyon, but you have to wait 40 minutes to hear if they shouted back before you can say another word. The system collapses under the weight of the silence. This forces a complete paradigm shift in how we think about data. We have to abandon the desire for real-time interaction and instead design a system that embraces the delay. The solution isn't about making data travel faster. That's impossible. It's about making data smarter and more patient. This is where revolutionary concepts like delay-tolerant networking, or DTN, enter the picture. Think of DTN not as the Internet, but as the Interplanetary Postal Service. Instead of demanding instant receipts, each node in the network, a satellite, a lander, a rover, or a habitat, has its own built-in digital post office. When a data packet arrives, the node stores it securely, checking its address label to see its final destination. It then patiently holds onto that package, waiting for the next available mail truck. This could be when an orbiting relay satellite swings overhead, or when the planetary alignment brings Earth into a better position for a clear transmission. Once that connection is established, the node forwards the packet on to the next hop in the journey. Data moves in a careful store and forward rhythm, hop by hop across the solar system, never getting lost because each node takes custody of it until the next link is confirmed. This isn't streaming, it's sophisticated digital couriering, and it requires a level of automated intelligence and reliability that our terrestrial networks have never needed to achieve. But the immense delay is only part of the puzzle. We also have to contend with the universe's tendency to simply erase our messages as they travel. Think of a data signal not as a tight, coherent beam, but more like a cone of light from a flashlight. As it travels, this cone spreads out, and the energy within it becomes diluted over a vastly larger area. This isn't a linear drop-off. It's governed by the brutal mathematics of the inverse square law. Simply put, if you double the distance to Mars, the strength of your signal doesn't just halve, it falls to a quarter of its original power. Triple the distance and it's down to a ninth. By the time a transmission has traveled the tens of millions of kilometers to another world, what started as a powerful, focused shout from a giant antenna has been reduced to an almost imperceptible whisper, drowned in a sea of cosmic static. This background noise is relentless. It's the constant hiss of the sun's radiation, the faint glow of the cosmic microwave background left over from the Big Bang, and interference from other stars and galaxies. Picking out a coherent data stream from this cacophony is like trying to hear a single person whispering in a roaring hurricane. To have any hope of being heard, our transmitters on Earth need to be phenomenally powerful, and the receivers out there need to be unbelievably sensitive. This is the raison d'etre for installations like NAS, a deep space network, a trio of gigantic radio dish complexes spaced around the globe. These massive antennas, some 70 meters wide, act as both megaphones and ultra-sensitive ears, straining to catch the faintest echoes of data from our distant robotic explorers. On Earth, we solve signal degradation with a simple, brute force method. We build repeaters. Every few kilometers along a fiber optic cable, an amplifier boosts the signal back to full strength, ensuring it arrives crisp and clear. But in the void between planets, there are no towers to build, no power lines to plug into. Each transmission is a single, desperate leap across a chasm with no net. This forces engineers into a constant battle of optimization, crafting every byte of data for maximum efficiency and minimal power draw. Energy is an incredibly precious commodity on a spacecraft or a Martian colony. Using vast amounts of it to shout data into the darkness is a costly trade-off against life support, heating, or propulsion. Sending a high-resolution image from the Perseverance rover isn't a trivial task. It can require hours of precious antenna time and a significant expenditure of energy for what we on Earth would consider a basic download. This stark reality means that the interplanetary internet can never be a high-bandwidth streaming paradise. Every single bit is hard-won. This necessitates not just powerful hardware, but incredibly clever software. We need error correction algorithms of a sophistication we've never needed before. These are like ultra-diligent proofreaders for data. They add redundant information to a transmission so that even if large portions of the signal are lost or corrupted en route, the original message can be perfectly reconstructed on the other end. But this redundancy comes at a cost. It means sending even more data to protect the original data, further taxing those limited power and bandwidth resources. The pursuit of a solution is driving innovation in a surprising direction: laser communications. By using focused light instead of radio waves, we can create a much tighter, more concentrated beam that loses strength far more slowly. Recent experiments like NAS, a deep space optical communications project, have demonstrated the ability to send data to tens of millions of miles using lasers, achieving speeds far beyond what radio can offer. This technology is still in its infancy, but it represents a beacon of hope, a future where the whispers between worlds might finally become a clear and steady conversation. So we're facing a universe that actively works against our data, erasing our signals and imposing impossible delays. But here on Earth, we've built a remarkable system to fight back: NAS, a deep space network. Imagine it as the planet's solitary telephone switchboard for the entire solar system. This isn't a vast, sprawling web of infrastructure. It's a meticulously crafted trio of complexes in California, Spain, and Australia. This specific placement is genius. As the Earth rotates, at least one of these sites can almost always see any given spacecraft, ensuring we're never completely out of touch. Each facility is equipped with absolutely colossal radio antennas, some as wide as a 20-story building is tall. These are the most sensitive ears and most powerful voices on the planet, capable of detecting the faintest whisper from a robot billions of miles away and shouting instructions back with enough force to be heard. For our current era of robotic exploration, this system is a masterpiece. It has guided Voyager into interstellar space, landed rovers on Mars, and brought us stunning images from the moons of Jupiter. But it operates like an exclusive, overbooked club. Every single mission from NASA, the European Space Agency, Japan, India, and others must formally request time on the DSN schedule. It's a constant, high-stakes juggling act. A team operating a Mars rover might have a precisely scheduled 8-hour window to receive their day's data. If a critical event happens on a mission to Saturn that requires immediate communication, controllers might have to negotiate and literally bump another mission off the schedule, delaying its precious data. This is a managed scarcity for a few dozen active deep space missions. Now, scale this reality up to a future where Mars isn't just home to a few rovers, but to a thriving colony of thousands of people. Each colonist isn't just a passive user, they are a potential data in point. Think of the traffic, not just scientific data, but personal video calls, educational content streaming from Earth servers, real-time medical telemetry from clinics, software updates for life support systems, and the constant background chatter of countless Internet of Things devices that make a modern habitat function. The demand for bandwidth would explode by orders of magnitude. The current DSN, as designed, would be instantly and completely overwhelmed. It would be like trying to supply a modern metropolis with drinking water through a single garden hose. The simple logistics of scheduling would become an impossible nightmare, where a personal call home might be allotted a 5-minute slot once a week. This glaring bottleneck forces us to confront a truth. A multi-planetary society cannot run on a single, Earth-centric switchboard. We need to build an entirely new architecture, a decentralized internet that exists in space itself. This means placing the network's backbone between the planets, not just on one of them. The vision involves constructing a permanent web of relay satellites, a celestial infrastructure. We'd need nodes in orbit around Mars to collect all the local traffic from the surface and other satellites. We'd need dedicated communication satellites positioned at stable Lagrange points, the gravitational sweet spots between celestial bodies that act as natural parking spots in space. These would serve as the vital interplanetary gateways, the routers that direct traffic across the solar system. The engineering and coordination required for this are Herculean, far surpassing the challenges of building a single colony. Each one of these relay satellites is a sophisticated, autonomous spacecraft that must function flawlessly for decades without hands-on maintenance. They need powerful, reliable transmitters, massive onboard storage to hold data while waiting for a clear transmission window, and incredibly precise pointing systems to aim their lasers or radio beams across millions of miles of empty space. And they all need to speak the same delay-tolerant networking language, creating a seamless, interoperable system. This isn't a project for one space agency. It demands an unprecedented level of international cooperation and investment, a unified global effort to build what is essentially the first true piece of off-world infrastructure. While building a habitat on Mars is a monumental achievement, it is a singular project. Building the interplanetary internet is about creating an entire ecosystem, a thriving digital highway that must be operational and resilient before large-scale colonization can even be considered sustainable. The colony depends on the network, making its construction the more foundational, and in many ways the more difficult task. This fundamental shift from instant gratification to cosmic patience is embodied in a revolutionary framework known as delay-tolerant networking, or DTN. To truly appreciate its elegance, let's contrast it with the system we all use every day. Our terrestrial internet runs on a suite of protocols called TCP/IP, which functions like a highly anxious, incredibly meticulous conversationalist. Every time you send an email or load a website, your device breaks the data into tiny packets and fires them off. For each packet sent, it immediately expects a tiny electronic receipt, an acknowledgement to come back. If that receipt doesn't arrive within milliseconds, your device assumes the packet got lost in the digital noise and promptly sends it again. This constant, rapid-fire "I sent it, I got it" handshake is the bedrock of our reliable, high-speed internet. But place this anxious system into the void between planets, and it becomes comically, catastrophically broken. A computer on Mars sending data would shout a packet into the void and then wait for that receipt. But by the time the acknowledgement finally trickled back from Earth 22 minutes later, the computer would have long since given up, having spent the entire interval frantically and uselessly resending the same packet thousands of times, completely clogging the precious communication channel with redundant noise. The very protocol designed for efficiency becomes the source of total failure. Delayed tolerant networking throws that entire anxious rulebook out the airlock. It doesn't fight the delay, it embraces it. The core philosophy of DTN is store and forward, and the best analogy for it is not a live phone call, but a highly reliable, automated interplanetary postal service. Imagine each piece of data not as a fleeting signal, but as a carefully wrapped digital package with a clear destination address. In a DTN system, every node in the network, this could be a rover on the Martian surface, an orbiter circling Mars, a relay satellite at a Lagrange point, or a large antenna on Earth, acts as a robotic post office. When a data bundle arrives at a node, the node doesn't panic if it can't immediately send it onward. Instead, it takes custody of the bundle. It securely stores the package in its own digital sorting facility and patiently consults its celestial map and schedule. It calculates when the next mail truck will arrive, perhaps when a specific communication satellite swings overhead in 37 minutes. Or when Earth rotates into a more favorable position in 6 hours. Once that connection is established, the node forwards the package to the next hop on its journey. The data bundle might hop from a lander to an orbiter, then from that orbiter to a dedicated relay satellite nearer to Earth, and finally from that satellite down to a ground station. Each hop is a deliberate, planned step, with the data safely stored at each point until the pathway is clear. This methodical process introduces a whole new world of complexity that our earthly networks never have to consider. Each of these digital packages, formerly called a bundle, must be incredibly self-sufficient, because it might be stored for weeks or months at a node waiting for the perfect transmission opportunity. It has to carry a huge amount of its own administrative data. It needs robust error-checking codes so the receiving node can verify every single bit arrived intact after a long, noisy journey through space. It requires significant redundancy, meaning extra data is added so that even if parts of the transmission are corrupted by solar radiation, the original message can be perfectly reconstructed. This is the ultimate form of better safe than sorry, but it comes at a cost. All this extra packaging information makes each bundle larger, which in turn consumes more of that precious, limited bandwidth and power required to send it. Perhaps the most daunting challenge of DTN isn't just the technology itself, but the monumental effort of getting everyone to use the same system. On Earth, the internet works because of universal standards. A device made in one country can communicate seamlessly with a server in another. For an interplanetary internet to function, that same level of standardization is required, but on a galactic scale. This means the world's space agencies NASA, the European Space Agency, Roscosmos, the China National Space Administration, the Indian Space Research Organization, and others must all agree to adopt and implement the exact same DTN protocols. This is a staggering diplomatic and technical hurdle. It requires unprecedented international cooperation, moving beyond terrestrial geopolitics to agree on a common language for the solar system. Each agency must invest in developing and testing compatible hardware and software, ensuring that a Chinese orbiter around Jupiter can flawlessly receive and forward a data bundle from an American probe near Saturn, which might ultimately be destined for a European ground station. This level of coordination is something colonization logistics rarely demands on the same scale. A habitat can be built using a variety of techniques and materials, but the network that connects them all must speak one universal tongue. The success of our interconnected future in space depends on this fragile, ongoing negotiation, making the creation of these protocols a quiet, behind-the-scenes endeavor that is every bit as difficult as landing on another world. Yet, even with a patient network designed to handle immense delays, we face an adversary far more chaotic and relentless than mere distance, the universe itself. Space is not the silent, empty void we often imagine. It is a cacophony of natural radio emissions, a symphony of interference that constantly threatens to drown out our fragile artificial signals. This cosmic noise comes from everywhere: the constant hiss of the sun, the powerful pulses from distant neutron stars, and the faint but pervasive glow of radiation left over from the Big Bang itself, the cosmic microwave background that fills every cubic inch of the universe. For a data transmission traveling tens of millions of miles, this is the equivalent of trying to hold a whispered conversation in the middle of a roaring rock concert. Every single bit of data we send is bombarded by this natural static, and without incredibly sophisticated filtering algorithms running on both the sending and receiving ends, our messages would be hopelessly corrupted, transformed into meaningless digital snow. This interference isn't just a nuisance, it's a direct threat to the integrity of the data itself. A particularly strong burst of radiation from a solar flare or a cosmic ray can have a very literal physical effect on the hardware. These high-energy particles can slam into a computer's memory bank, delivering enough charge to flip a single binary digit from a 0 to a 1 or vice versa, an event known as a bit flip. On Earth, our atmosphere and magnetic field shield our electronics from the vast majority of these particles, but in space or on the surface of an unshielded world like Mars, they are a constant reality. A single bit flip in the wrong place could have catastrophic consequences. It might change a crucial command in an instruction set, alter a critical life support reading, or corrupt the encryption key for a secure transmission. This forces engineers to build every single device in the network with radiation-hardened components, which use specialized designs and materials to resist these energetic assaults. But this hardening process adds immense cost, complexity, and often reduces processing power, meaning the computers routing interplanetary traffic are inherently less powerful than the everyday device in your pocket. To combat this, the data itself must be armored. This is where advanced error-correcting codes come into play. These are not simple checksums. They are incredibly complex mathematical formulas that add a significant amount of redundant information to every transmission. Think of it like sending a vital message but writing every sentence 3 times in 3 different languages. Even if 2/3 of the message is smudged or torn, the recipient can still cross-reference the surviving parts to reconstruct the original perfectly. These codes allow a receiving node to not only detect that errors have occurred during transmission, but to actually identify which specific bits were flipped and correct them automatically. The downside is that this redundancy dramatically increases the size of each data bundle, which in turn consumes more of that precious and limited bandwidth. We are forced to make a constant trade-off. send less actual information to make room for the extra coding needed to protect it, a taxing burden on a system where every byte is already hard-won. This invisible battlefield extends to security as well. The development of quantum computing promises machines that could, theoretically, break the current encryption standards that protect all our online banking and communications. While this is a concern on Earth, it's a far more urgent problem for interplanetary data. A message from Mars could be in transit for months, stored on various relay satellites. An adversary could capture and store these encrypted bundles, waiting for the day when a sufficiently powerful quantum computer is invented to crack them open, potentially revealing decades of scientific or personal communications. This necessitates a move toward quantum-resistant encryption algorithms now, long before they are needed on Earth, to future-proof the interplanetary internet against threats that don't even fully exist yet. The contrast with the challenges of physical colonization is stark. Protecting humans from radiation, while difficult, is a problem with known solutions: thick walls, buried habitats, water shielding. We understand the materials and the physics, but protecting data from the same radiation is a perpetual arms race, a fight fought with ever more complex algorithms and codes against a universe that is constantly and chaotically generating new interference. For the colonists, a well-designed habitat provides a stable, shielded environment. For their data, every single transmission is a journey through a gauntlet, requiring continuous innovation in signal processing and error correction, just to ensure a simple message arrives home intact. This relentless, unseen struggle to maintain the clarity of a whisper against the roar of the cosmos is a hidden dimension of the challenge, one that makes building the network a far more dynamic and complex undertaking than building the walls that will contain it. This brings us to one of the most practical and unyielding constraints of all: energy. Every single watt of power aboard a spacecraft or on the surface of Mars is a precious, hard-won commodity. On Earth, we flip a switch and expect an endless river of electricity to flow, powering our devices and our networks without a second thought. But in space, energy is a strict budget, and every system, from life support to propulsion to communication, must fiercely compete for its share. The act of shouting data across the void is astonishingly power-hungry. To put this into perspective, consider the high-gain antenna on the Perseverance rover on Mars. When it's actively transmitting data back to Earth, it can draw over 100 watts of power. That's roughly the same amount of energy used by several bright incandescent light bulbs running simultaneously, all being consumed just to send a few precious megabytes of data on a journey that takes tens of minutes. Now imagine scaling that up for an entire colony. The energy required for a community to maintain a constant, robust day to link with Earth would be staggering, dwarfing the power needs of many other critical systems. This creates a fundamental and difficult trade-off for mission planners and, eventually, for the settlers themselves. A Martian colony's energy budget will be meticulously allocated to priorities that are quite literally matters of life and death. The largest share will go to life support, powering systems that scrub carbon dioxide from the air, recycle water, and maintain a breathable atmosphere. After that comes habitat temperature regulation, protecting humans from the punishing negative 80-degree Fahrenheit average surface temperature. Then there's power for food production in hydroponic labs, for mobility systems like rovers, and for scientific experiments. Communication, as vital as it is, must get in line. This means that uploading a high-resolution video diary or downloading a large software update might not be a simple, instantaneous task. It could be scheduled for a specific time of the Martian day when energy reserves are highest, perhaps prioritized below the need to produce a certain amount of oxygen for the next sol. The colonists themselves might face a societal choice. Do we use our surplus solar energy today to power the communication array for a longer contact window with our families? Or do we divert it to the oxygen generator to build up a larger safety reserve? This transforms a technical challenge into a deeply human one, adding layers of social and psychological complexity to the already daunting engineering puzzle. The primary source of this energy throughout the inner solar system is the sun, but solar power introduces its own set of severe limitations. The intensity of sunlight follows the same inverse square law that plagues our data signals. As you travel farther from the sun, the available solar energy drops dramatically. Mars, being about 1.5 times farther from the sun than Earth is, receives less than half the amount of sunlight. A solar panel on Mars that is identical to one on Earth will generate less than 50% of the power. This means a Martian colony needs vastly more solar panel real estate just to meet its basic survival needs, let alone power a hungry communication system. Furthermore, solar power is inherently intermittent. Every Martian night, which is roughly the same length as an Earth day, the colony would be forced to run on battery power alone. During a global dust storm, which can shroud the entire planet for weeks or even months, sunlight can be reduced to a tiny fraction of its normal level, forcing the colony into a severe energy conservation mode where non-essential systems, including routine communications, would likely be shut down entirely to preserve power for the absolute essentials of survival. This harsh reality forces a complete rethinking of how a network operates. Our earthly internet is an always-on system with data flowing continuously in the background. An interplanetary internet must be an opportunistic system. Communication can't be a constant drain on the power grid. It has to happen in brief, scheduled, high-power bursts. Think of it as a sprinter rather than a marathon runner. A communication system on a relay satellite might spend most of its time in a low-power, sleep mode, quietly storing data it has collected. Then, during a pre-calculated and meticulously planned window when Earth is in the perfect position in the sky, it would wake up, power up its high-gain antenna or laser to maximum capacity, and blast its entire stored cache of data across the solar system in a concentrated, high-speed burst lasting just minutes. This approach maximizes the efficiency of every joule of energy used for transmission, but it requires incredible coordination and patience. Data isn't sent when it's created. It's sent when the energy and orbital geometry align to make it most efficient. This is the ultimate expression of the energy dilemma, proving that the network's very heartbeat is dictated not by user demand, but by the unforgiving arithmetic of power consumption and celestial mechanics. While we grapple with the physics of distance and the harsh realities of power and interference, a far more subtle and mind-bending challenge emerges from the very fabric of the universe, the problem of time itself. Here on Earth, we take synchronized time completely for granted. Our entire digital world, from stock market trades to streaming services, relies on the flawless precision of the Network Time Protocol, or NTP. This system uses a network of atomic clocks to keep every computer on the planet synchronized within milliseconds of each other. It's the invisible glue that holds our modern world together, ensuring that when you send an email, the server knows exactly when it arrived and that financial transactions are processed in the correct order. This system works because the delays involved are tiny and predictable, but this concept of a universal now completely unravels the moment we step off our home planet. The first and most obvious complication is the sheer distance. A clock on Mars and a clock on Earth are not just separated by space, they are separated by time. Let's say we decide that all interplanetary data should be stamped with Earth's Coordinated Universal Time, or UTC. A colonist on Mars sends a data packet at what their clock says is 12 p.m. UTC. But that signal takes 12 minutes to travel to Earth. By the time it arrives, clocks on Earth will already read 12:12 p.m. The event, from Earth's perspective, happened in the past. Now, imagine two data packets are sent from different Mars habitats at the exact same local moment. Depending on their positions relative to Earth and the specific routing paths their data takes through the relay network, they could arrive on Earth in a different order. Without a sophisticated way to account for these transmission delays, the interplanetary internet would have no way to establish a true sequence of events, which is catastrophic for everything from scientific data logging to financial ledgers. This problem is compounded by a deeper, more fundamental weirdness: Einstein's theory of relativity. Time is not absolute. The rate at which a clock ticks is affected by gravity and velocity, a phenomenon known as time dilation. A clock on the surface of Mars, which has about 38% of Earth's gravity and a different orbital speed around the Sun, will literally run at a slightly different rate than a clock on Earth. The difference is minuscule, maybe a few milliseconds gain or loss over a year, but for computers that need nanosecond precision to organize data packets, that drift is significant. Over years of operation, the clocks on two planets would slowly but surely fall out of sync. Your perfectly synchronized interplanetary network would gradually develop a temporal drift, making it impossible to know if a timestamp from Mars is truly comparable to one from Earth. We can't just periodically resync the clocks like we do on Earth with NTP, because the signal carrying the sync command would itself be delayed by the very same relativistic effects you're trying to correct. You'd be trying to set a watch by listening to a shout that took 20 minutes to reach you. This temporal chaos forces a complete rethinking of how we label events. A simple solution might be to have all systems use their own local planetary time. Mars has a sol that is 24 hours and 39 minutes long. Colonists might live and work on Mars time, while mission control on Earth operates on UTC. But every single data packet transmitted across the solar system would need to carry at least two timestamps: its time of origin in the local time of the sending node, and the estimated time of arrival in the local time of the receiving node, calculated based on the known transmission delay. This metadata would be essential for any system trying to piece together a coherent timeline of events. A scientist on Earth receiving a data stream from a Martian seismometer would need to see that a tremor was recorded at Mars local time 1542, and that the data was received on Earth at UTC 1803, and then use an algorithm to reconcile those into a single understanding of when the event actually happened in the solar system's timeline. We would need to invent entirely new temporal frameworks that don't yet exist, a solar system-wide standard time that accounts for relativistic effects. This isn't just a software patch, it's a profound exercise in theoretical physics and practical engineering. We might develop a master clock standard for the solar system, perhaps based on a weighted average of clocks at various gravitational potentials, or even a clock positioned at a gravitationally neutral point. Every device on every planet and spacecraft would then constantly calculate its offset from this master solar system time, stamping all data with this adjusted value. Without solving this riddle of synchronization, the interplanetary internet wouldn't just be slow. It would be fundamentally incoherent, a digital realm where cause and effect are blurred, and the simple act of scheduling a file transfer or authenticating a digital signature requires a PhD in physics to untangle. All of these challenges: the immense delays, the cosmic interference, the energy constraints, and the mind-bending problem of time converge into one ultimate, non-negotiable requirement: security. On Earth, our digital security model is fundamentally built on the assumption of immediacy. When a new software vulnerability is discovered, a patch can be deployed globally within hours. If a hacker attempts to breach a firewall, intrusion detection systems can identify and neutralize the threat in real time. Our entire defense strategy is a rapid reaction force, dependent on the ability to respond to threats almost instantly. But place this model into the interplanetary context, and it collapses completely. Imagine a sophisticated cyber attack targeting the life support systems of a Martian colony. The malicious code is detected the moment it activates. An alert is immediately sent to mission control on Earth. That warning scream takes 12 to 22 minutes to arrive. By the time security analysts on Earth even begin to analyze the threat, nearly an hour could have passed since the attack began. Their response, a patch, a counter-command, an emergency shutdown protocol, would then take another 22 minutes to travel back to Mars. In that total window of over 40 minutes, a hostile actor could have already breached critical systems, altered atmospheric controls, locked colonists out of their own machinery, or stolen vast amounts of sensitive scientific data. The colony would be forced to defend itself autonomously with whatever tools it had on hand, while waiting for help that is always at least 40 minutes too late. This transforms cybersecurity from a matter of data protection into a direct matter of life and death. This terrifying delay forces a complete paradigm shift in security philosophy. We must move from a reactive model to a proactive, predictive, and supremely resilient one. Every single device, from a personal tablet to a Habitat's central computer, must be designed to be inherently secure by design, not just secure by update. This means hardware-level security features, systems that can autonomously detect and isolate anomalous behavior without needing to phone home for instructions, and a level of redundancy that allows a compromised system to be physically disconnected without bringing down the entire colony's network. The network itself must be built with segmentation and air gaps, not as an afterthought, but as a foundational architectural principle. The problem of delay also cripples our most fundamental tool for securing data: encryption. Today's strongest encryption standards, like AS256, are considered secure because it would take even the most powerful supercomputers thousands of years to break them through brute force. But that assessment assumes the encrypted data is only vulnerable for a short period. For an interplanetary transmission, the threat model is completely different. A piece of encrypted data, be it personal communications, scientific findings, or command codes, could be in transit for months, stored on various relay satellites along the way. A patient adversary could intercept and record these transmissions, storing the encrypted data for years or even decades. They could then use advancing computing technology to slowly work on cracking it. The encryption that was considered unbreakable today might be trivial to break with the quantum computers of 2040. This means we cannot rely on current standards. The interplanetary internet must be built from the ground up with what are known as post-quantum or quantum-resistant cryptographic algorithms. These are advanced forms of encryption that are believed to be secure against an attack from a future quantum computer. This technology is still in its experimental stages on Earth, but for a multi-planetary civilization, it is an immediate and critical necessity. Beyond protecting the data itself, we face the profound challenge of verifying identity across the void. On Earth, we use digital certificates and public key infrastructure to confirm that a website or an email sender is who they claim to be. This system, too, relies on rapid checks with certificate authorities. In space, that quick verification is impossible. This opens up a horrifying new frontier for deception. A hostile actor could spoof the identity of mission control, sending fabricated instructions to a spacecraft that appear 100% legitimate. They could use advanced deepfake technology to create a seemingly real-time video message from a trusted commander, ordering a diversion of resources or a change in course. Verifying the authenticity of any command will require new, delay-tolerant authentication protocols, perhaps involving multiple, independent confirmation paths and pre-shared keys that are changed on a rigid, predictable schedule known only to the senders and receivers. The contrast with the security challenges of physical colonization is stark. Protecting a colony involves strong physical walls, airlocks, radiation shielding, and environmental controls, difficult engineering problems, but ones with tangible, physical solutions. Securing the interplanetary internet is a fight against invisible, patient, and evolving threats in a domain where the fundamental rules of engagement are broken by physics itself. It requires not just building stronger locks, but inventing entirely new kinds of locks for doors that won't be built for a century. It makes the digital security of the network not just an adjunct to the mission, but a pillar of interplanetary safety and trust as critical as any life support system. A breach in a habitat wall can be patched. A breach in the network that connects that habitat to Earth could unravel the very fabric of interplanetary society before anyone even knew it was happening. While the challenges of connecting Earth and Mars are immense, they represent only the first chapter in a much grander story. Our ambitions don't end at the red planet. We dream of bustling outposts on the moons of Jupiter, scientific stations orbiting Saturn, and perhaps one day, voyages to other stars. An interplanetary internet can't be a one-off solution built for a single route. It must be a scalable, adaptable framework designed to grow and evolve across the entire solar system and beyond. This requirement for infinite scalability introduces a layer of complexity that far surpasses the challenges of building a single, stationary colony on Mars. Consider the starkly different environments this network must eventually serve. The delicate dance of communication between Earth and Mars is challenging, but at least it's a relationship between two planets in relatively stable, nearby orbits. Now extend the network to Jupiter. The gas giant is on average over 5 times farther from the Sun than Mars is. A one-way light time delay to Jupiter isn't measured in minutes, but in hours, anywhere from 35 minutes to a staggering 52 minutes depending on planetary alignment. A simple ping from a research base on Europa would take over an hour and a half to receive a reply. The protocols and patience required for Mars would be pushed to their absolute limits. And the signal itself, weakened by the immense distance, would be a whisper of a whisper, demanding even more powerful transmitters and more sensitive receivers just to maintain a basic trickle of data. The problem becomes even more complex when we look at the intricate orbital mechanics of places like the Jovian system. A network serving Jupiter wouldn't just be talking to one world, it would need to connect a multitude of moving targets. Imagine a relay satellite trying to maintain links between a lander on the volcanic moon Io, a submarine probe in the subsurface ocean of Europa, a balloon station in the clouds of Jupiter itself, and the distant Earth. Each of these nodes is moving at a different velocity, appearing and disappearing from each other's line of sight as they swing around the giant planet. The network architecture must be dynamic and intelligent, constantly recalculating the best paths for data bundles in a celestial environment that is in perpetual, chaotic motion. A static Earth-Mars-centric design would be utterly useless here. This forces engineers to adopt a radically different design philosophy: modularity. The interplanetary internet cannot be a monolithic, finished product. It must be built like a set of interoperable cosmic Lego bricks. The core protocol, the delay-tolerant networking bundle, is the universal connector, the stud that allows any two pieces to snap together. But the nodes themselves must be highly specialized and replaceable. A communications satellite designed for the inner solar system, with large solar panels to harvest abundant sunlight, would be a frozen, powerless relic at Jupiter. A node for the outer solar system would likely need to be powered by a small nuclear reactor, like the radioisotope thermoelectric generators used on deep space probes like Voyager and Curiosity. The antennas, lasers, and onboard computers would all need to be designed for their specific environment, but they would all speak the common DTN language, allowing new, more advanced modules to seamlessly join the network and replace older ones over decades of operation. This forward-looking, systems-level thinking stands in sharp contrast to the more immediate focus of colonization. Building a habitat on Mars is, by its nature, a location-specific endeavor. Engineers are solving for one set of constants: Martian gravity, Martian atmospheric pressure, Martian regolith. The solutions can be bespoke and optimized for that single environment. But the architects of the interplanetary internet are solving for variables. They are building a system that must function under the crushing gravity of Venus, the cryogenic cold of Triton, and the radiation-bathed void of interplanetary space all at once. It is a more abstract and visionary undertaking, less about pouring concrete and more about designing a set of rules and standards so robust and flexible that they can govern day to flow in places we have not even discovered yet. Ultimately, this grand vision of a connected solar system cannot be the project of a single nation or agency. The budget and coordination required dwarf even the most ambitious colonization plans. It demands unprecedented and sustained global cooperation. We are not just building a network, we are building the first true piece of off-world infrastructure for all humanity, a project that will unfold over centuries. It requires a long-term investment in research, development, and deployment that makes the budget for a Martian city look like a down payment. The success of this digital nervous system for our species will determine whether our future in space is a collection of isolated outposts or a truly unified, interplanetary civilization, capable of sharing knowledge, resources, and a common human experience across the breathtaking vastness of the cosmos. Yet for all the technical wizardry of delay-tolerant protocols and quantum-resistant encryption, the most unpredictable and complex element in this entire system remains the human mind. We can shield computers from radiation and design networks to handle immense latency, but we cannot so easily re-engineer fundamental human psychology. A colonist on Mars facing a sudden drop in pressure in a greenhouse module is conditioned by a lifetime on Earth to expect immediate answers. Their instinct is to call for help and receive guidance, to collaborate in real time to solve the problem. But in this new reality, their urgent query vanishes into the void, and the silence that follows isn't a sign of a broken connection, it's a feature of the system. They are utterly alone with the problem for a minimum of 40 minutes, a span of time where a localized crisis can escalate into a full-blown catastrophe without any possibility of outside intervention. This profound isolation creates a cognitive load that rigorous training can only partially mitigate. The frustration, the anxiety, the potential for panic-driven errors, these are not software bugs to be patched, but human factors that become a critical variable in the system's overall resilience. This forces the network to evolve beyond a mere data pipeline into an intelligent partner. The interplanetary internet must be imbued with a layer of sophisticated artificial intelligence that acts as a cognitive buffer, anticipating needs and automating responses to bridge the agonizing communication gap. Imagine an AI assistant integrated into every habitat system and spacesuit. It would constantly monitor telemetry, environmental data, and even the colonists' vital signs. If it detects the first signs of that greenhouse pressure drop, it doesn't wait for the human to ask for help. It immediately and autonomously compiles a crisis data packet, all relevant schematics, the last 10 minutes of atmospheric readings, logs of recent maintenance, and fires it toward Earth without being asked. Simultaneously, it presents the colonist with a curated set of solutions, not a generic manual, but the specific emergency procedures for that module, the location of the nearest repair kits, and a list of crewmates whose own suit AIs indicate they are nearby and available to assist. It pre-fetches and caches data based on predictive models, ensuring that the information a colonist is likely to need for their scheduled tasks is already stored locally long before they think to search for it. This level of intelligent automation adds a staggering layer of software complexity that a physical colony on its own does not inherently require. We are not just building a network, we are building a proactive digital central nervous system that must be trustworthy, reliable, and deeply integrated into every aspect of life. Its algorithms must be sophisticated enough to distinguish between a true emergency and a minor anomaly, to learn the individual preferences and working styles of each colonist, and to never, ever cry wolf in an environment where alarm fatigue could be deadly. The development of this AI becomes as crucial as the development of the life support hardware itself, a monumental software engineering challenge that runs in parallel to all the physical construction. Beyond the immediate human-machine interaction, an even subtler challenge emerges over time: cultural drift. As Martian and eventually other planetary societies develop in isolation, bathed in different skies and shaped by unique daily souls, their ways of thinking and communicating will naturally diverge from Earth. Their slang, their technical jargon, their work rhythms based on a 24-hour and 39-minute day, and even their fundamental priorities will evolve. This cultural divergence could inadvertently manifest in their digital interactions. A Martian engineer might develop a new, highly efficient data format for geological surveys that makes perfect sense locally, but is completely unreadable by Earth-based systems expecting a standard format. A simple request phrased in the direct, efficiency-driven communication style of a seasoned colonist might be misinterpreted as rude or abrupt by an Earth-based controller unaware of the cultural context. To prevent a future where planets develop digital dialects that are mutually unintelligible, the architecture of the interplanetary internet must enforce universal standards from the very beginning. This goes far beyond agreeing on a protocol. It means establishing a common set of data ontologies, file formats, and even communication etiquette that is baked into the core of the network itself. It requires a continuous, conscious effort of diplomatic and technical coordination to ensure that as we branch out as a species, we remain bound together by a common digital language. We must build a system that not only allows a scientist on Earth to read data from a probe at Pluto, but also ensures that a doctor on Mars can understand the medical scan sent by a colleague on Earth a decade from now, and that a birthday video message from a grandparent never fails to play on a child's tablet under the pink sky of a new world. The success of this great endeavor hinges not just on our ability to conquer physics, but on our foresight to nurture and preserve our human connection across the growing expanse. And while we solve these profound technical and human puzzles, we must also navigate a labyrinth of earthly constraints that are, in many ways, just as daunting: the intertwined challenges of economics and politics. The vision of building cities on Mars captures the public imagination and, more importantly, attracts massive investment. We see this already with ambitious private companies and national space agencies pouring billions into rocket development, habitat prototypes, and plans for resource extraction. These endeavors have a clear, if long-term, business case: the potential for scientific discovery, technological spin-offs, national prestige, and eventually, the utilization of extraterrestrial resources. The funding has a destination and a promised return, however speculative. Building the interplanetary internet, by stark contrast, suffers from a critical lack of a direct revenue model. It is the ultimate public utility, the roads and bridges of the solar system, essential for every other activity but incredibly difficult to monetize directly. Who pays for the construction and maintenance of a relay satellite at a Lagrange point that will be used by everyone but owned by no one? A private company might balk at the staggering upfront cost with no clear path to turning a profit, while governments might struggle to justify the expense to taxpayers who don't immediately see the value in a deep space internet backbone. This creates a dangerous paradox. The success of every commercial and scientific venture on Mars is wholly dependent on this network, yet its funding is perpetually uncertain, at risk of being perpetually deferred in favor of more glamorous, tangible projects like landing the first humans. This essential digital infrastructure could become a tragic afterthought, leaving future colonies technologically stranded millions of miles from home. This funding dilemma is compounded by a diplomatic challenge of cosmic proportions. On Earth, we have international bodies that manage the finite resources of our communications spectrum and orbital slots, a process that is already fraught with complexity and geopolitical tension. Now extrapolate that to an interplanetary scale. We must negotiate entirely new treaties to answer fundamental questions that have never been asked before. How do we allocate transmission frequencies between planets to prevent a cacophony of interference? If a data packet from a European satellite relayed through a Japanese node causes a critical error on an American lander, who is legally and financially liable? The concept of data sovereignty becomes mind-bending. Does data generated by a citizen of one nation, but stored on a server in a habitat governed by an international consortium, fall under whose jurisdiction? These are not abstract legal debates, they are practical necessities that must be solved before the first packet is sent. The process will require a level of international cooperation that mirrors the Antarctic Treaty System, but must be far more robust and technically detailed, involving not just diplomats but engineers, lawyers, and ethicists from every spacefaring nation. It's a slow, painstaking, and often unglamorous process of building consensus. Meanwhile, the agreements for physical colonization, while complex, are more straightforward, focusing on established concepts like territorial use, resource rights, and environmental protection, challenging, but built upon a foundation of historical precedent like the law of the sea. The political framework for the Internet must be invented from whole cloth, creating a new branch of interstellar law to govern the flow of information. And without it, the technological marvel we build could collapse under the weight of terrestrial disputes. This financial and diplomatic maze adds layers of risk and uncertainty that physical colonization efforts can often bypass through the sheer force of a singular, tangible goal. A company can set a deadline for a crewed landing. A nation can aim to plant its flag on Martian soil. These are powerful, motivating objectives. The Internet, however, is a distributed, enabling technology. Its progress is measured in protocols adopted, satellites launched, and treaties signed, incremental steps that lack the same headline-grabbing power. The danger is that this foundational project languishes in committee meetings and budget debates, perpetually 5 years away from serious investment. The colonies might rise, but they would do so in isolated silos, each potentially developing its own incompatible network standards, creating a future of digital Babel where a Martian internet cannot talk to an Earth internet, defeating the entire purpose of being an interplanetary species. The greatest obstacle to connecting worlds, it turns out, may not be the void of space, but the familiar confines of our earthly economic and political systems. This stark contrast between testing the physical and the digital aspects of our interplanetary future reveals another layer of the challenge. When we test a habitat for Mars, the process is remarkably tangible. We build full-scale mock-ups of living quarters and laboratories here on Earth, placing them in harsh environments like the Utah desert or the volcanic slopes of Hawaii. Astronauts and scientists move in for months at a time, conducting concrete, observable experiments. They test the strength of airlock doors, the efficiency of water recyclers, and the psychological impact of confinement. We can see a crack form in a window seal. We can measure the oxygen levels as they fluctuate. The problems are physical, and the solutions are often equally physical. A stronger material, a redesigned component, a revised procedure. This testing, while difficult, operates in the realm of our direct senses and our extensive experience with engineering in extreme environments on our own planet. Testing the protocols for an interplanetary internet, however, is an exercise in abstract simulation against forces we cannot easily replicate. How do you accurately recreate a 22-minute signal delay combined with the random, corrosive effects of cosmic radiation on a data stream? Earth-based laboratories can only approximate these conditions. Engineers construct complex virtual simulations, using banks of computers to artificially inject latency and packet loss into a network, trying to mimic the brutal environment of space. But these simulations are inherently incomplete. They can't truly capture the chaotic interplay of solar flares, gravitational lensing, and the sheer scale of the vacuum. The best analog we have is actually conducting these tests in space itself, using the Moon as a provisional testing ground or dedicating expensive deep space missions solely to validating a new communications protocol. These opportunities are rare, incredibly costly, and come with enormous lead times. A failed test on a dedicated communications satellite might mean waiting years for the next launch window and budget cycle to try a revised design, creating a development timeline that is measured in decades, not years. This creates a high-stakes, iterative cycle of design, test, fail, and redesign that is far slower and more uncertain than the process for colonization technology. A habitat design might go through a dozen iterations in a year based on feedback from analog missions. A new networking protocol might only get one chance to be tested in a real deep space environment every few years. Each failure in those precious, limited tests isn't just a setback. It's a potential showstopper that could force a fundamental rethink of the entire architecture. A bug in the error correction code discovered after a satellite has been launched might be impossible to fix, rendering a billion-dollar asset useless for its primary purpose. This relentless pressure for perfection on the first attempt adds immense risk and cost to the entire endeavor, making the development of a reliable network a much more cautious and painstakingly slow process than building the habitats it is meant to serve. The colony can be prototyped and improved upon on Earth. The network must be Chinese letter perfect before it ever leaves the ground. This stark difference in testing underscores the ultimate, non-negotiable demand placed upon the interplanetary internet: absolute, unwavering reliability. Here on Earth, an internet outage is a temporary frustration. You might miss a meeting, be unable to stream a movie, or have to resort to using your phone's data plan for a few hours. It's an inconvenience, a minor blip in our hyper-connected lives that is usually resolved by a technician rebooting a router or splicing a cable. the stakes are low and the fixes are often swift and local. Now transport that same scenario to the surface of Mars. A network failure there isn't about a missed video call, it's a potential catastrophe. Imagine a scenario where a colony's main communication antenna is disabled by a micrometeorite impact or a crippling software glitch. On Earth, a repair crew could be dispatched within the hour. On Mars, the colonists are utterly on their own. They might possess the physical spare parts, but without a connection to the vast knowledge base and expert guidance on Earth, troubleshooting a complex, unfamiliar system becomes a terrifying guessing game. This loss of contact could last for months, waiting for the next favorable planetary alignment to attempt a low-bandwidth link through a secondary system, or worse, waiting for a repair mission from Earth that would take over 2 years to arrive. In that time, a minor technical fault could cascade into a life support failure. A medical emergency could go undiagnosed, and the psychological toll of isolation would become immense. Every piece of data that fails to arrive, a medical research paper, an update on an approaching dust storm, a software patch for a known habitat vulnerability, carries a tangible risk to human life and the mission itself. This terrifying vulnerability forces engineers to design a system with a level of redundancy that would be considered absurdly extravagant on Earth. The interplanetary internet cannot have a single point of failure. It must be a multi-layered, deeply interconnected web of pathways. Data flowing from a Martian colony shouldn't have just one route home. It should have a dozen simultaneously available options. This means the network must be populated with a constellation of redundant nodes, communications orbiters circling Mars, dedicated relay satellites parked at stable Lagrange points, and even other landers and rovers on the surface that can act as temporary wireless hotspots. If one path is blocked or broken, the system doesn't just give up, it immediately and autonomously reroutes the data through another available channel. This requires a self-healing capability baked into the network's very core, where every node is constantly aware of the health and status of its neighbors, creating a dynamic, living map of connectivity across the solar system that can adapt in real time to damage or disruption. This approach to redundancy highlights a fundamental philosophical difference between keeping people alive and keeping data flowing. The redundancy for a physical colony, while critical, is often more straightforward and hardware-based. You have backup oxygen generators, redundant power systems, and extra seals for the airlocks. You can physically touch and test these spares. Their reliability can be quantified through stress tests and material science. The redundancy for data, however, exists in the abstract realm of software and protocols. It's about the flawless execution of millions of lines of code designed to anticipate every possible failure mode. You can't kick the tires on an algorithm, guaranteeing that a delay-tolerant networking bundle will always find a path home, even if 3 of the 4 Mars orbiters suddenly go offline, is a problem of breathtaking complexity. It requires not just redundant hardware, but redundant intelligence, multiple layers of decision-making logic that must themselves be fault-tolerant. This elevates the interplanetary internet from a mere utility to a life-critical system, every bit as vital as the oxygen supply or the radiation shielding. Its failure is not an option. This supreme reliability requirement transforms the network's architects from software engineers into guardians of existential safety. They are designing a system that must function perfectly, not for a few years but for decades, in an environment where no human can ever go to perform a manual reset. Every design choice, every line of code, is made with the crushing weight of knowing that a future life may one day depend on its flawless operation. This immense responsibility to create a digital lifeline that never, ever breaks is a burden that colonization engineers, for all their challenges, do not bear in the same way. They build walls to protect against the void. The network architects must build an intelligent, ever-vigilant sentry that stands watch over the only bridge back home. Even with a perfectly designed and resilient network, we are then forced to confront one of the most profound and uniquely human challenges of interplanetary life: the brutal economics of bandwidth. On Earth, data is essentially free and limitless. We stream ultra-high-definition movies without a second thought. But for a Martian colony, every single megabyte is a precious, expensive commodity fought over by competing needs. This forces a grim and constant process of data triage, a digital form of rationing that colonization, with its focus on physical resources like air and water, does not impose with the same immediacy. The colony must answer a deeply ethical question with every transmission window: what gets to be sent and what must be left behind. This isn't a simple technical decision. It's a value judgment that pits the psychological well-being of the colonists against the scientific goals of the mission and the absolute demands of safety. Imagine the scenario. The weekly high-bandwidth communication window with Earth is open, but a massive dust storm is predicted to begin in 45 minutes, which will severely degrade the signal. There is only enough time and clear bandwidth to send one large data package. Competing for that slot are three options. The first is a compressed video message compilation from the families of all 100 colonists, a vital morale boost that everyone has been anticipating for weeks. The second is a huge dataset from the geology lab, representing a month of painstaking analysis on a rock sample that might prove the past existence of microbial life on Mars, a discovery of historic proportions. The third is a routine but large diagnostic log from the primary water reclamation plant, which an AI has flagged with a 97% probability of indicating a future filter failure that could threaten the entire colony's water supply in the coming month. Who gets to make this call? Is it the colony's commander, burdened with the psychological weight of choosing between their crew's happiness and a potential Nobel Prize? Is it a vote among the colonists, potentially creating factions and resentment? Or is the decision outsourced to an algorithm on Earth, programmed with a coldly utilitarian set of rules designed to maximize colony survival probability? This is the ethical labyrinth created by limited bandwidth. A physical colony manages scarcity of oxygen or power through engineering and strict usage protocols. But data scarcity forces a continuous philosophical negotiation about what matters most in building a new society: immediate human comfort, long-term scientific knowledge, or the unwavering priority of survival. To navigate this, mission planners and ethicists must work together long before the first ship launches to develop a robust and transparent framework for data prioritization. This framework would likely establish a multi-tiered system, much like a hospital's triage protocol in an emergency room. Priority 0 would be reserved for immediate, life-critical commands and telemetry, a decompression event, a medical crisis, or an imminent systems failure. This data jumps the queue instantly and automatically. Tier 1 might be high-priority scientific data essential for mission goals and operational data for maintaining colony infrastructure. Tier 2 could include personal communications and non-essential scientific findings, and Tier 3 might be entertainment media or large archival transfers. But even with a clear framework, excruciating edge cases will abound. Does a colonist's heartfelt video message to a dying parent on Earth get elevated to Tier 1? Does the discovery of potential ancient life automatically trump a diagnostic report on a slightly underperforming oxygen generator? These are not questions with easy answers. They require a system that can blend predefined rules with the possibility of human override, a process that itself consumes time and bandwidth to debate and authenticate the override command. This introduces a further, chilling layer of complexity, the need to automate these ethical decisions. During a solar flare that suddenly cuts a transmission short, an AI system on the comms satellite might have milliseconds to decide which partially sent data bundles to preserve and which to jettison to save the integrity of the highest priority packets. We are therefore programming artificial intelligence not just to manage data, but to make moral choices with real-world consequences. We are embedding human-valued judgments into lines of code, asking machines to weigh the emotional needs of a community against the cold, hard metrics of systems health. This venture into the realm of AI ethics is far more advanced and critical than anything required for the physical construction of a habitat. Building a wall is engineering. Deciding what message gets to pass through the only door in that wall is philosophy, and it is a burden that makes the task of building the network infinitely more complex than the structures it connects. This necessity for seamless communication reveals a hidden layer of complexity that physical colonization can sometimes avoid, the absolute requirement for universal interoperability. While different nations or companies might build their Martian habitats using entirely different construction techniques, life support systems, or even power standards, those habitats can still function as self-contained, isolated units. A Japanese module using a different airlock design than an American one doesn't necessarily prevent both from operating successfully on their own. They can still be neighbors even if they aren't directly connected. The colonization effort can, at least initially, tolerate a certain degree of technological isolationism. The interplanetary internet, however, demolishes this possibility. It is the ultimate connector, and its very purpose is defeated if it cannot speak every language. Imagine a near-future scenario where a NASA rover makes a groundbreaking discovery that requires immediate analysis by a more powerful instrument aboard a Chinese orbiter. If their communication systems are built on completely different proprietary protocols, that crucial handshake is impossible. The data is trapped, the moment is lost, and the potential for discovery is stifled by a digital language barrier. This isn't just an inconvenience, it's a catastrophic failure of the network's core purpose. A disconnected habitat is a lonely outpost. A disconnected network is a collection of useless gadgets, rendering the entire interplanetary endeavor far more dangerous and infinitely less productive. This forces a level of international and inter-corporate cooperation that is unprecedented in the history of exploration. It's one thing to agree on a map of who builds where. It's entirely another to mandate that every single actor, from national space agencies to private enterprises, adopts the exact same open communication standards for their hardware. This means NASA, ESA, Roscosmos, the China National Space Administration, SpaceX, and Blue Origin all must willingly integrate the same delay-tolerant networking software stack, use the same frequency bands, and adhere to the same data formatting rules. They must agree on a universal postal system for the solar system before the first package is ever sent. Achieving this is a Herculean diplomatic task, far more challenging than the technical hurdles of building the routers and satellites themselves. It requires setting aside deep-seated competitive instincts, national security concerns, and commercial advantages for the greater good of a connected future. A company might develop a fantastically efficient and proprietary compression algorithm for data, but if it isn't adopted as a universal standard, its usefulness is limited to its own tiny corner of the cosmos. This push for open standards runs directly counter to the traditional models of competition and proprietary technology that often drive innovation and investment on Earth. It transforms the construction of the interplanetary internet from a purely technical race into a delicate, ongoing negotiation, a project that is as much about building trust between nations and corporations as it is about building relay satellites. Without this cooperation, we risk creating a solar system plagued by digital fragmentation, a future where humanity has reached the stars only to reconstruct the same incompatible, inefficient technological silos we have on Earth. We could end up with a Martian internet, a Jovian internet, and an Earth internet, all incapable of speaking to one another, turning the dream of a unified interplanetary civilization into a bureaucratic nightmare of adapters, translators, and missed opportunities. The physical colonies might rise, but they would be isolated archipelagos in a sea of space, unable to share knowledge, resources, or support in a timely manner. The network, therefore, becomes the great unifier, the project that forces us to collaborate on a species-wide level, making its successful implementation not just an engineering milestone, but a profound test of our ability to work together as we step into the cosmos. All of these challenges, the physics of distance, the fragility of signals, the ethics of bandwidth, and the necessity for global cooperation culminate in a single, indispensable requirement: an artificial intelligence of unprecedented sophistication. While a Mars colony will certainly utilize AI for managing robotics, life support, and resource allocation, the role of AI for the interplanetary internet is far more complex, abstract, and fraught with risk. The colony's AI can be thought of as a building superintendent, overseeing physical systems within a contained environment, largely following pre-programmed protocols with the safety net of human oversight a radio call away. The networking AI, however, must become the solitary air traffic controller for the entire solar system, making high-stakes judgment calls in utter isolation, with a help desk that is always at least 40 minutes out of reach. This is because the dynamic, chaotic nature of space communication makes pre-planned routing schedules almost useless. The AI's primary job will be to constantly predict and optimize. It must calculate the most efficient path for every single data bundle in real time, weighing a dizzying array of variables that are in constant flux. It needs to know that a scheduled transmission window with Earth is about to be degraded by a coronal mass ejection from the Sun, and therefore it should reroute the high-priority medical data through a relay satellite near Venus that will have a clearer line of sight in 12 minutes. It must predict that the Mars orbiter currently storing a month's worth of geological data will soon pass into the planet's shadow, losing solar power and going offline, so it should urgently dump its cache to the lunar gateway while it still can. This isn't just following a flowchart, it's forecasting celestial weather and making proactive decisions to avoid cosmic traffic jams that could last for days. Furthermore, this AI must operate with a level of autonomy that is currently the realm of science fiction. On Earth, if a network management AI encounters a novel problem or an ambiguous anomaly, it can default to a safe mode and ping a human engineer for instructions. In the interplanetary context, that ping would take longer than most emergencies to unfold. The AI cannot afford to freeze. It must be able to detect anomalies, a strange pattern of dropped packets from a specific satellite, a slight degradation in a laser link's fidelity, a power spike in a transmitter, and not only diagnose the potential cause but also take corrective action without a single byte of input from Earth. It might decide to take a critical relay node offline for self-diagnostics, reroute all traffic through backup channels, and even deploy a pre-programmed software patch to what it suspects is a glitching component, all based on its own assessment. The potential for a single misdiagnosis to trigger a cascading error that knocks out entire sections of the solar system's communications web is a terrifying and very real possibility. This leads to the most daunting hurdle of all. How do we train and validate such a perfect, trustworthy intelligence? Machine learning, the technology behind most modern AI, is not magic. It requires massive datasets to learn from. It needs millions of examples of network traffic, anomalies, successes, and failures to understand the intricate patterns of deep space communication. And herein lies the profound chicken and egg problem. We cannot gather the vast datasets of real interplanetary traffic needed to train this AI until we have a large-scale interplanetary internet already running. But we cannot safely build and run that large-scale internet without the AI in place to manage it. We are stuck in a catch-22 of cosmic proportions. Our current data from missions like Voyager or the Mars rovers is minuscule, representing point-to-point links, not the sprawling multi-node mesh network we need to create. Training an AI on simulated data is a start, but simulations are inherently incomplete models of reality. They cannot capture the infinite complexity and randomness of the actual space environment. Deploying an under-trained AI to manage humanity's vital communications link would be an act of incredible recklessness. This dependency on a yet-to-be-invented, hyper-reliable artificial intelligence represents a frontier of innovation that far surpasses the AI needs of physical colonization. It pushes the boundaries of machine learning, software verification, and fault-tolerant computing into entirely new territories. While colonists will rely on AI to keep the air breathable, the interplanetary internet will rely on AI to be the air itself, the invisible, essential medium that allows every other function to operate. The pressure to solve this AI puzzle isn't just about faster data. It is the absolute prerequisite for ensuring that our future among the stars is not one of isolated, silent outposts, but a truly connected and collaborative interplanetary civilization. The brutal Martian environment presents a relentless assault on any form of technology, and communication hardware is on the front line of this battle. While a habitat provides a controlled, shielded environment for its human inhabitants and their life support systems, the antennas, satellites, and relays of the interplanetary internet are left utterly exposed. They must endure conditions that would instantly destroy their terrestrial counterparts. A dust storm on Mars isn't merely an inconvenience, it's a months-long siege. Fine, abrasive dust particles can coat solar panels, starving a relay satellite of power, and sandblast sensitive optical lenses used for laser communications, gradually scouring them into uselessness. The extreme temperature swings from a relative high of 70 degrees Fahrenheit on a summer day to negative 190 degrees Fahrenheit at night cause metals and composites to expand and contract relentlessly, testing every weld, screw, and circuit board connection to its absolute limit. This shared challenge of environmental survival, however, comes with a critical divergence in how we address it. A habitat, while it must be robust, has a secret weapon: its residents. If a solar panel on a habitat's roof becomes caked in dust, an astronaut can don a suit and clean it. If an external sensor malfunctions, it can be inspected, repaired, or replaced. This capacity for on-site maintenance is a luxury the network is categorically denied. A communications orbiter circling Mars, a relay station at a Lagrange point, or a transmitter on a distant moon is utterly alone. There are no repair crews, no resupply missions for a faulty circuit board. Sending a spacecraft to fix a failed satellite is often more expensive and complex than just building and launching a new one, and for nodes far out in the solar system, it's completely impractical. This fundamental isolation forces a philosophy of design that prioritizes autonomous survival above all else. The network cannot simply be reliable, it must be self-healing. This is achieved through a deep, multi-layered redundancy that would be considered extravagant on Earth. Critical relay satellites aren't launched as singles, they are deployed in constellations. If one fails, the others immediately recalibrate to take over its traffic load. Each individual node is itself a masterpiece of fault tolerance, packed with duplicate systems. It might have 2 or 3 main computers that constantly check each other's work, ready for a seamless handoff if one starts making errors. It will have multiple power pathways, backup transmitters, and several different methods for orienting itself, ensuring that a single meteoroid impact or mechanical failure doesn't spell its doom. This demand for near-perfect reliability under unimaginable duress forces engineers into a process of exhaustive, painstaking over-engineering. Every component, from the smallest capacitor to the largest antenna dish, must be sourced, tested, and qualified for a decades-long mission in a vacuum while being bombarded by radiation and extreme thermal cycles. These aren't the off-the-shelf parts found in a smartphone. They are radiation-hardened, specially shielded, and built to tolerances that make them astronomically expensive. The development cycle for such hardware is measured in years, as each design undergoes simulation after simulation, subjected to vibrational stresses, radiation baths, and thermal vacuum tests that mimic the harshness of space. This drives the cost and timeline for deploying the network's backbone to levels that far exceed the development of even the most advanced habitat systems, which can often utilize more commercial, albeit ruggedized, technology within the safety of their pressurized walls. Consequently, the networking hardware sent into the void must possess a resilience that mirrors the colonists it serves. It is designed for a single, overarching purpose: to endure. It is the silent, vigilant sentry that never sleeps, operating for decades without a single hand to maintain it. Its survival ensured not by intervention, but by the foresight and immense effort poured into its creation before it ever left Earth. This relentless requirement for autonomous durability makes each node a technological marvel, but it also represents one of the heaviest burdens in the entire endeavor, a constant reminder that the digital lifeline between worlds is only as strong as its most vulnerable and most isolated link. This staggering difference in development timelines creates a fascinating and counterintuitive race against time. The dream of establishing a permanent human presence on Mars, once the stuff of pure science fiction, now feels almost within our grasp. We can point to the rockets, the prototype habitats undergoing trials in desert wastelands, and the ongoing research into closed-loop life support systems. This progress is built upon a foundation of knowledge we've been accumulating since the dawn of the space age. It's an extension of existing engineering and biological sciences, albeit pushed to their absolute limits. We are adapting what we know to a new, extreme environment. Because of this, optimistic projections from leading space agencies and private companies suggest the first pioneering crews could be landing on the Martian surface within the next 2 to 3 decades, marking the beginning of a new chapter for humanity. The interplanetary internet, however, operates on a completely different clock. Its development isn't about adaptation. It's about fundamental invention. We are not merely scaling up existing technology, we are conducting foundational research into entirely new fields of physics, computer science, and material engineering. The protocols that will form the backbone of this network, like delay-tolerant networking, are still in their infancy, being tested in small, isolated analog environments or on limited demonstration missions. They are promising proofs of concept, but they are a far cry from the robust, battle-hardened, and universally adopted standard required to support a thriving colony. The journey from a successful lab experiment to a solar system-wide implemented standard is a long and arduous one, filled with the need for international treaty agreements, the development of interoperable hardware from different manufacturers, and years of real-world testing in the unforgiving environment of deep space. This timeline disparity becomes even more pronounced when we look at the critical technology of optical communications, which uses lasers to achieve the high bandwidth links necessary for anything beyond the most basic data. While we have successfully demonstrated laser communication from the Moon and from Mars' orbit, these have been spectacular but singular experiments. They are the equivalent of the Wright brothers' first flight at Kitty Hawk, a monumental proof that it can be done, but not yet a reliable transcontinental airline. Scaling this technology to create a persistent, high-availability network of laser links that can operate flawlessly through cosmic dust, solar interference, and across billions of miles is a challenge that might not be fully solved for half a century or more. It requires advances in laser stability, precision pointing and tracking systems that can hold a beam on a target millions of miles away, and detectors sensitive enough to catch a single photon after its incredible journey. The consequence of this innovation gap is the very real possibility of a profound connectivity chasm. The first Martian settlers could find themselves living in a state-of-the-art habitat, equipped with the tools for survival, but digitally stranded. They might possess the most advanced scientific instruments ever built, capable of making earth-shattering discoveries, but lack the bandwidth to send more than a handful of high-resolution images back home each day. Personal communication could be relegated to brief, heavily compressed text-based messages or audio clips, with video calls to loved ones on Earth being a rare and logistically complex luxury reserved for special occasions. This connectivity deficit wouldn't just be an inconvenience, it would act as a severe brake on the growth and development of the colony itself. Scientific collaboration would be stifled by agonizing delays. The transfer of complex engineering schematics for new construction would be painfully slow, and access to the ever-evolving knowledge base and cultural output of Earth would be a trickle, not a flow. The colony could stagnate, isolated not just by distance but by a lack of information. This looming challenge demands a unique form of patience and persistence, one that operates on a generational scale. The scientists and engineers working on these communication technologies today are not building for a mission that will launch in 5 years. They are architecting the foundational systems for a civilization that their grandchildren might inhabit. Their work requires a long-term vision that transcends quarterly reports and political election cycles, sustained by the unwavering belief that the digital connectivity between worlds is not a secondary feature, but the central nervous system of a multi-planetary species. It is a testament to human foresight, a commitment to solving the profound challenges of tomorrow today, ensuring that when we finally arrive on Mars to stay, we are not just residents of a new world, but active, integrated citizens of a connected solar system. Beyond the cold calculus of bandwidth and the rigid logic of protocols lies a far more fluid and unpredictable challenge: the evolution of human culture and language itself. A Martian colony will not be a sterile, static outpost. It will be a living, breathing society, over time isolated under a pink sky and living by a 24-hour and 39-minute sol. The colonists will naturally develop their own unique cultural identity. This will manifest in inside jokes based on shared experiences we on Earth can't fathom, slang terms coined to describe the peculiarities of their world, and cultural references that draw from their own history and environment, not ours. A simple phrase like "another long sol" might carry a weight of shared fatigue and resilience that an Earth-based controller would completely miss. A joke about the Val's Marineris commute or a warning to watch for the dust devils in Sector 7 would be rich with local meaning but utterly opaque to someone on our planet. This cultural and linguistic drift isn't just a curiosity, it's a potential minefield for mission-critical communication. Our current translation software and even advanced AI are trained on terrestrial languages and contexts. They can translate words, but they struggle with nuance, sarcasm, and culturally specific meaning. Imagine an AI on Earth processing a routine status report from a Martian engineer that reads, "The primary oxygenator is throwing a real tantrum today, but we've sweet-talked it for now." A literal interpretation might flag a serious systems failure involving physical violence against machinery. In reality, it's just the engineer's colorful way of saying they've performed a standard recalibration. This kind of misunderstanding, multiplied across thousands of daily interactions, could lead to a constant background hum of confusion, wasted time, and potentially catastrophic misdiagnoses of situations. This creates a layer of complexity that physical coexistence, with its shared physical context and body language, can often smooth over. Two colonists in the same habitat can clarify a misunderstanding with a glance or a quick question. But across the void, that clarifying conversation takes over 40 minutes. The network, therefore, must evolve beyond a simple data pipe into a context-aware communications partner. The software that manages these interplanetary exchanges will need to incorporate adaptive learning models that continuously update based on the evolving linguistic patterns of the colony. It would need to build a constantly refining cultural dictionary, learning that first footing now refers to being the first person to enter a newly pressurized module, not a Scottish New Year's tradition, or that doing a phobos means a task that rises quickly and sets just as fast. This necessity transforms the network's role from passive carrier to active participant in preserving shared understanding. It's no longer enough for the system to guarantee that a packet of bits arrives unchanged. It must also help ensure that the meaning and intent behind those bits are preserved across the light years. This might involve AI-powered tools that gently flag potentially ambiguous phrases for the sender before transmission, suggesting clearer alternatives or adding subtle, automated contextual footnotes for the receiver on Earth. A message about a dust up in the Ag Dome might be automatically annotated for Earth receivers with colony context. Dust up colloquially refers to a minor technical dispute among personnel, not a literal particulate event. This isn't about censoring language, but about building bridges of comprehension across an ever-widening cultural gap. The stakes of this are deceptively high. A simple miscommunication over a technical procedure, a misread tone in a text-based command, or a cultural reference that lands as an insult could erode the vital trust between the colony and mission control. While a physical handshake is impossible, clear and unambiguous communication is the handshake of the interplanetary age. Ensuring that this digital handshake remains firm, that a joke is understood as a joke and a warning is heard as a warning, is a subtle but profound challenge. It requires us to blend the hard science of data transmission with the soft science of sociolinguistics, creating a network that is not only smart but also culturally literate, ensuring that as we diverge into separate worlds, we never stop speaking the same language. Even as we engineer solutions for the classical internet, a more revolutionary technology looms on the horizon, promising to rewrite the rules of communication entirely: quantum networking. This isn't just an upgrade, it's a fundamental shift in how we think about information itself. At its heart is the bizarre and beautiful phenomenon of quantum entanglement, where two particles become inextricably linked, their fates intertwined across any distance. Change the property of one its spin, for instance, and its partner instantly reflects that change, no matter if they're sitting side by side or separated by the entire solar system. This spooky action at a distance, as Einstein called it, forms the basis for a quantum internet offering two breathtaking advantages. The first is perfect, unbreakable security. Any attempt to eavesdrop on a quantum-encrypted message would unavoidably disturb the delicate state of the entangled particles, immediately alerting the sender and receiver to the presence of an intruder. The second is a potential for immense speed and computational power, linking future quantum computers across planets to solve problems that are utterly intractable today. But harnessing this quantum magic across interplanetary distances introduces a set of hurdles so profound they make the challenges of classical networking seem almost mundane by comparison. The core obstacle is maintaining quantum coherence. An entangled particle is like a perfectly balanced spinning top, incredibly fragile. Any interaction with its environment, a stray photon, a bit of heat, even the subtle pull of gravity, can cause it to decohere, collapsing its delicate quantum state into an ordinary classical one. This is the equivalent of the signal degradation we see with radio waves, but amplified to an extreme degree. On Earth, researchers are struggling to maintain coherence for more than a few hundred kilometers in specialized fiber optic cables, using supercooled equipment in vibration-dampened laboratories. Now, imagine trying to perform that same delicate experiment across 40 million kilometers of empty space, with particles that must be generated, transmitted, and detected on platforms shaking from thruster firings, baking in sunlight, and freezing in shadow. The engineering required to create a stable enough environment for interplanetary quantum communication is a problem of a completely different magnitude than anything colonization demands. This forces us to confront a critical path dependency that could shape our interplanetary future for decades. A Mars colony can be built and can begin to thrive using classical, well-understood technology. Its life support power systems and even its basic radio-based internet can be constructed with the physics and engineering principles we've mastered over the last century. The colony's progress isn't gated on a fundamental scientific breakthrough. The interplanetary internet, however, might be. While we can build a functional, if slow and patient, system with delay-tolerant networking today, a truly high-bandwidth, secure, and efficient network for a large-scale civilization might require a quantum leap, literally. We could find ourselves in a situation where the colonies are ready and waiting, but the digital infrastructure needed for them to flourish as a fully integrated part of a solar system-wide society is still trapped in earthbound laboratories, awaiting the invention of a reliable quantum repeater or a method to extend coherence times to astronomical scales. This creates a fascinating and uncertain timeline. The development of a planetary colony and a quantum internet are now on two parallel but wildly different tracks. Colonization is an engineering marathon, a test of execution and scale. The quantum internet is a scientific sprint into the unknown, a search for answers to questions we are still learning how to ask. One is about applying known science, the other is about discovering new physics. This divergence means that the networking challenge isn't just harder than colonization in terms of complexity, it's also far more unpredictable. We can chart a relatively confident course to landing humans on Mars. We cannot yet chart a course to creating a stable, entangled link between there and Earth. This potential paradigm shift adds a layer of breathtaking possibility, but also profound uncertainty to the entire endeavor, suggesting that the final chapter in the story of the interplanetary internet may be written not by engineers but by quantum physicists. Looking back at the history of our own internet provides a fascinating but cautionary blueprint for what lies ahead. The network you're using right now didn't spring into existence fully formed. It was a story of organic, often chaotic growth. It began as a small, trusted network connecting a handful of academic and military institutions, and its foundational protocols were built on assumptions of proximity and instant response. There was no grand master plan for a global system serving billions of people and devices. This meant that as it exploded in scale, engineers were constantly patching, updating, and jury-rigging solutions to problems they never anticipated, from the exhausting of IPv4 addresses to the constant cat-and-mouse game of cybersecurity. This iterative trial-and-error approach worked on Earth, albeit with growing pains, because the stakes of a network outage were generally limited to frustration and lost revenue. That entire model of development is a luxury we cannot afford beyond our atmosphere. An interplanetary internet cannot be built on the fly. Every single protocol, every line of code, every hardware specification must be designed from the very first day with scalability and resilience as its core, non-negotiable principles. We are building for a future a century from now, for a system that may one day need to connect not just Earth and Mars, but outposts on Ceres, research stations on Titan, and spacecraft in the Oort cloud. A fundamental design flaw discovered after a dozen relay satellites are already deployed across the solar system would be a catastrophe of unimaginable proportion, potentially requiring decades and trillions of dollars to rectify. There are no service technicians for a router at a Lagrange point. This forces a paradigm of extreme foresight and precision, where the first design must be as close to perfect as humanly possible. We can find some comfort in looking at other models of isolated human expansion. The colonization of Antarctica offers lessons in operating in a brutally hostile environment with limited resources and no hope of immediate rescue. The International Space Station is a masterclass in international cooperation and maintaining a continuous human presence in microgravity. These analogs provide invaluable frameworks for the physical and psychological challenges of living on another world. But for the network, there is no direct historical parallel. No terrestrial settlement has ever had to contend with communication delays measured in hours or the complete inability to perform manual maintenance on its critical communication infrastructure. We are, in many ways, writing the rulebook as we go, inventing entirely new best practices for an environment that actively defies our earthly intuitions. This doesn't mean we ignore the lessons of our own Internet's history. In fact, we must study them with intense scrutiny. The looming crisis of IPv4 address exhaustion teaches us to build an addressing system that is inherently vast from the outset. The constant parade of security vulnerabilities and patches reminds us that security cannot be an afterthought. It must be baked into the hardware and the protocol at the most fundamental level. The evolution from an open, trusting academic network to a heavily fortified global utility shows us the importance of building in robust authentication and encryption from day one. However, these are just starting points. Space adds layers of complexity that make direct comparisons limited. A 22-minute delay transforms a simple security patch into a critical vulnerability with a 44-minute response time. Cosmic radiation introduces the possibility of bit flips and data corruption on a scale that earthly data centers never face. The lessons from Earth give us the questions: but the answers must be invented for an entirely new realm, making the construction of this interplanetary backbone a more deliberate, cautious, and profoundly complex undertaking than establishing the physical footholds it will connect. While a single determined nation or a massively funded private company could theoretically succeed in planting the first boots on Mars and establishing an initial colony, driven by a singular vision, a unified chain of command, and a focused allocation of resources, this same go-it-alone approach is utterly impossible for building the interplanetary internet. You cannot have a purely American internet, a Chinese internet, and a European internet all operating independently in the same space. The void between planets is a shared commons, and data signals, unlike rockets, do not respect national borders. If multiple actors deploy their own networks using conflicting frequencies, competing protocols, and incompatible data formats, the result won't be healthy competition. It will be a catastrophic digital cacophony. Imagine the chaos if one nation's Martian relay satellite transmits on a frequency that completely drowns out the faint signal from another nation's rover, rendering years of scientific work useless. Or if a data bundle from a commercial lunar outpost formatted for a proprietary system is completely unreadable by the main Earth-based receiving station. This isn't just inefficient. It's a recipe for a paralyzed, balkanized solar system where the immense potential for shared discovery and mutual support is sacrificed at the altar of sovereignty and competition. This forces a level of international coordination that is unprecedented in human history, far surpassing even the complex diplomacy of the International Space Station. The ISS works because it is a single, tangible structure with defined modules and clear operational rules agreed upon by its partner nations. The interplanetary internet, by contrast, is an invisible, borderless, and infinitely expanding entity. The collaboration required is not just about who builds which hardware, it's about agreeing on the very language of off-world communication. This means every spacefaring entity on Earth, NASA, ESA, Roscosmos, the China National Space Administration, the Indian Space Research Organization, SpaceX, Blue Origin, and others, must willingly adopt the same universal standards. They must all agree to use the same slice of the radio spectrum for deep space transmission to avoid mutual interference, a process managed on Earth by the International Telecommunication Union, but now needing to be enforced on a solar system-wide scale. They must all implement the same delay-tolerant networking protocols, ensuring a data bundle from a Japanese orbiter can be flawlessly received, stored, and forwarded by an American relay satellite. This is a monumental task of technical diplomacy, requiring a surrender of individual preference for the collective good, a concept that often moves at a glacial pace in the world of international relations. And herein lies the critical paradox of timing. The development of the physical technology for colonization, bigger rockets, advanced life support, habitat construction can thrive in a competitive environment. This competition can even accelerate progress, as we've seen with the rapid advancements in reusable launch systems. A colony can be started by one party and still function, even if others are using different techniques nearby. But the Internet's development is gated by cooperation, not competition. Its progress is tied to the speed of multinational treaty negotiations, the painstaking work of standards committees, and the building of trust between geopolitical rivals. History shows that these processes are inherently slow. It took years of negotiation to establish the framework for the ISS, and that was during a period of relative post-Cold War optimism. Replicating that level of agreement in today's more fractured global landscape, and for a project of even greater scope, could take decades. This creates a very real and frustrating scenario, we might see thriving colonies established on Mars long before they have a reliable, high-bandwidth connection to Earth. The colonists could be living in sophisticated habitats, conducting groundbreaking science, but remain digitally isolated, forced to rely on a slow, intermittent, and frustratingly limited trickle of data. They would be like the most remote outposts of the 19th century, waiting months for news from home, unable to benefit from the real-time knowledge and cultural exchange that defines a modern, integrated society. The physical achievement of colonization would be complete, but the dream of a truly connected interplanetary civilization would remain unfulfilled, held hostage by the slower, more complex human endeavor of building consensus. Uniting humanity around a shared set of rules for a digital infrastructure may, in the end, prove to be a far more difficult challenge than uniting them around the goal of reaching another world. It is the ultimate test of whether we can overcome our earthly divisions to build a common future in the cosmos. As we've journeyed through the immense complexities of interplanetary connectivity, one truth emerges with crystal clarity. While planting flags on Martian soil represents a monumental achievement of human will, weaving the digital threads that connect those distant worlds to home may be our species' ultimate technical masterpiece. We've confronted the brutal physics of light-speed delays that shatter our earthly notions of instant communication, requiring us to invent entirely new protocols that embrace patience rather than fight against it. We've grappled with the cosmic interference that constantly threatens to erase our whispers across the void, forcing innovations in error correction and laser communications just to be heard. The staggering energy requirements for shouting data into the darkness create painful trade-offs between survival and connection, while the mind-bending problem of relativistic time threatens to desynchronize our entire understanding of cause and effect across the solar system. These technical hurdles alone would be daunting enough, but they're compounded by challenges that strike at the very heart of human nature. The psychological impact of communication delays transforms how we interact, forcing colonists to operate in profound isolation during emergencies where Earth's guidance is always 40 minutes too late. The ethical dilemmas of bandwidth rationing pit personal morale against scientific discovery and vital systems maintenance, creating heartbreaking choices about what data gets priority when every megabyte carries a tangible cost. Perhaps most significantly, this endeavor demands unprecedented global cooperation, requiring nations and corporations to set aside competition and adopt universal standards, a diplomatic achievement that may prove more difficult than any engineering problem. While colonization applies our known sciences to new extremes, building the interplanetary internet forces us to invent entirely new sciences, to reimagine the very nature of communication itself. This invisible digital infrastructure will become the central nervous system of our multi-planetary species, more critical to our survival and growth than any single habitat or rover. A mechanical failure on Mars can be fixed with local tools and ingenuity, but a flaw in the network is a vulnerability that stretches across the entire solar system. The success of our physical colonies depends entirely on this resilient web of data we weave between them, their ability to share knowledge, request help, and remain psychologically connected to humanity's collective consciousness. As we stand at the threshold of becoming an interplanetary species, let's remember that our greatest achievement won't merely be reaching new worlds, but bringing them closer together through a network that reflects our highest aspirations for cooperation and connection. The bridges we build in the digital realm may ultimately prove more important than the rockets that carry us there.